Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge. It's the show we created where we get a chance to, rather than look at a movie 1 minute at a time, we examine a guest who joins us one moment of their life at a time. The key moments, the big ones, the things that got them to where they are today. And we found them to be interesting enough to be on our show. I'm your host, as you heard from the opening, Alan Sanders, and joined by my co-host, Walt Murray. Walt, how's it going, buddy?
Yeah, it's going good. How about you?
You know, it's been fantastic. I know we talked about in the last episode that we'd be getting ready to do some camping, and it has been great. I know this episode drops 2 weeks from when we record, but this has been the polar opposite of my last camping stories. It could not be better. If there's one knock, which I'm not even going to say is a knock, one morning it was 43 degrees when we woke up, but you know, if you need something to wake you up in the morning, it's that. It gets you ready to go.
Hey, after the last 2 summers where it feels like it has been 90 degrees every day for 2 years, I will take 43 degrees.
No, it's been gorgeous. We went kayaking in the lake just the other day. I brought my fishing line, dropped it in, didn't really catch anything, but that's okay. It's all about having fun. It's amazing how you can just unplug. I didn't have my phone. I didn't have news. I didn't have anybody bothering me. I wasn't reading any tweets. I wasn't reading any Facebook messages. My heart rate was like really, it was almost like dangerously low. I was so calm. It was like I've been eating some of your special gummies or something, you know? I was like, hey man, this is kind of chill. It's amazing when you unplug from news, how you just feel better about yourself and maybe the world around you.
Yeah, well, me and a buddy of mine are going to hit the lake probably for one of the last times of the summer this Wednesday. And just, you know, throw a couple lines in the water. If we catch something, we catch something. If we don't, we don't. But just get out and enjoy the warm weather for the last couple days. And, you know, before they unplug the dam and let all the water out of the lake for the winter. So,
well, they're already starting to slow drain. You can tell the lake's about 2 or 3 feet down from where it was even just about a month ago. So there's still plenty of deep places where we're camping. When we used to come over to the same cove and go swimming when we would just kind of take a break, it was 16 to 20 feet deep in this cove. So it's down 3 feet. It's still, you know, 16, 17 feet deep.
Yeah, well, and that's fine. You know, even if as long as I can get the boat in the water, that's all I care about. I'm not even really worried about what I catch or if I catch anything. I'm just enjoying being outside and like you said, just kind of letting the pressure out and enjoying it a little bit.
So this week, you know, we always try to catch up on what's been going on since the last time we chatted. I know I'm camping, but there's been some, and I don't get really heavy into politics, but I will say it's been an interesting last 4 or 5 days leading into this recording, showing that even the president of the United States is not immune to a virus floating around. But at the same time, demonstrating that if you address it quickly, if you know what it is and you take care of yourself, even somebody who's technically 74 years old can pull through COVID-19. It's not a death sentence that I feel like so many people are wearing as a cloud over their head. They're afraid to do anything.
No. And politics aside, you just look at the numbers, and the numbers are showing that it is not the death sentence that people were afraid of. And it's you do have to take it seriously, but also, you know, we have had a historic few days because if I remember right, this is the first time a president has been kind of rushed to the hospital or, you know, whatever in an emergency situation since Reagan was shot. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember at any point when they've had to officially. Now, maybe there was a surgical procedure that I'm just not recalling off the top of my head.
Oh, yeah, sure. There have been several of those. You know, Reagan had some stuff
where they kind of temporarily have the 25th in place just in case. But no, in this case, you know, he's the president. Love him or hate him. That's not what we're here for. has been able to still administer to his duties. He's still got a staff around him. And, it shows that the virus doesn't pick and choose based on what you believe or not believe, where you go or not go. It could hit you today and not your wife at the same time. I mean, I've seen it happen just in my own circle of friends where 9 or 10 people will all of a sudden get it all at once, but a spouse doesn't ever come down with it or has such mild symptoms. You just wonder, well, is that it? Is that all I got? So, you take it seriously. But
well, and I have a friend who just he felt like he got hit by a train. He was like, I am sure I have it. He had all the symptoms. He went in and tested, took the quick test and the other test, which is supposed to be more accurate. Both of them came back negative. 2 weeks later, he went in and got an antibody test and tested positive for the antibodies.
See, I'm not going to knock the testing, because what do? You ramp up as fast as you can. You got to applaud someone who's got the foresight to say, as much as I think the government can do everything, it's bloated and slow. So let's clear up the red tape. Let the private sector do what it does best and innovate and go to market quickly. Let's encourage it. But the fact of the matter is there is no 100%. Even look at your typical birth control. It'll say on the back, this is not a 100% effective solution. It may work 99% of the time, but there's some dude going around, I never wanted to be a dad.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, and every year we go through the flu shot. And I think it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, they said that they just missed it.
Right.
They missed what flu strains were coming around, and they just missed it. And I think that was the year that everybody was sick.
Yeah, they try to guess based on where the strain is on the other side of the world as it migrates, in its pattern around the world. And they go, okay, we're looking at Australia, we're looking at New Zealand. What did they just get through? What's coming maybe our way? And I remember that. It was like 3 years ago. And they said, yep, we sold everybody on this idea. And it turned out to be a harsher, more virulent strain. And everyone got sick, and they even apologized. They said, it was a crapshoot. And that's why it's not even a vaccine. You're not getting a flu vaccine. You're getting a shot that they think is close enough to what might come around to help lessen or maybe even get you over the hump of not coming down with something, or you might feel kind of run down for a day, but it doesn't hit you maybe as hard as it would had you not had it. But on the flip side, and we've got the show I do on the radio, I've got a doc that joins me every month, and he is 100% behind, if you keep your hands clean, if you keep them out of your face, if you keep your diet to where you're getting your vegetables and your fruits and your vitamins and all the stuff you're supposed to do, it's amazing how you can avoid getting sick, period.
Well, I agree with him on most things, and he's probably right about that. But all I know is I take the flu shot every year, and about 4 years ago I didn't, and I got the flu. So I'm trying to do all the other right things, but I'm also a believer in the flu shot. So
now, Walt, I've seen you on Stakeout. Your hands are all up in your grill. You're just like, I gotta pick my face, my nose. I gotta itch my teeth.
I
got some chicken wing back
teeth,
here in a molar.
Make sure all my teeth are there. And
no, you know what though? It's hard. It really is hard to keep the fingers out of your face, and I know that. I watch people all the time, and it's unconscious. I think somebody did a study that said, on average, you could touch your face 15 times in a minute.
Oh, I'm not surprised. And I have hay fever, so I end up with my nose and eyes itching, and so I'll just unconsciously, like rub my eyes and things like that. So I know that I'm high risk behaviorally on stuff like that. But
well, and here's the crazy thing. Except for when I was in the Navy, when I had no choice because Uncle Sam said, you will take a flu shot and you will enjoy it. I have never had a flu shot, and I've never had the flu.
It's funny because I've got friends who are the same way. They've never taken it, never gotten the flu. So,
no, I've had pneumonia.
Yeah, well,
that wasn't any fun.
That is not fun. But I've got 3 kids all in school. One of them's in college, and 2 are in high school. And my wife is a kindergarten teacher, so I'm around all kinds of viruses, diseases, and other ailments all the time. So I feel like I'm the one who gets everything. They're immune to all of it, and they bring it home to me. So I kind of err on the side of safety, but I, at the same time, am also open to what Dr. Ryan's saying and other people are saying about it just not being that effective.
Well, it's like everything else. It's if you have a little bit of a weakened immune system, or you may not have the best diet, maybe it is a stronger way for you to overcome. And I know a lot of people who take the flu shot because they're like, hey, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it doesn't cost me a whole lot. And some insurance, it doesn't cost you anything. So why not? Honestly, I'm just at a point where I don't have a health insurance plan. So I choose to, choose my doctors and my costs out of my own pocket. And that's just how we've lived for the last 10 years. If I feel like I need to go to the doctor, I'm going to pony up the $70 or $80 for the office visit, and then I pay whatever it costs for the prescription. But I certainly save a whole lot of money on premiums.
Yeah, well, and you probably also shop stuff around and call around and say, hey, what's your cost for this and that? And so it's really a more responsible way to run your own healthcare. And you probably tend to eat better and exercise more and all that just to keep the cost down.
So I don't want to belabor this too much, but, I think everybody at some point, and maybe it's just me being a dad, but at some point your kids need to grow up. At some point you can't make their decisions for them. People need to start learning how to adult for themselves. And that's what I say all the time. I'm like, look, do what makes you feel comfortable and right. I'm not a big fan of an overarching presence telling me how to live my life.
No, I am definitely not into that either. So yeah, I'm with you. And when I used to watch all the Star Treks, when they'd get stranded on a planet, they'd be like, oh, we'll provide for everything you need for all eternity. I'm like, no, I will not do that. I'm with Captain Kirk on that one. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't like that either. Fortunately, I've been very blessed to avoid some of the big stuff. I have my share of small things, but I've been able to avoid some of the real big problems so far.
Rest assured, you are nothing like a small thing to me.
And that is one of the problems that I'm working on at this point, to make sure that other big things don't arrive on this big thing that I'm carrying around with me. So,
hey, you know what, though? We finally had a chance to do a show together. We're going to get to our guest here in just a minute, but we had a chance to finally be back in studios, and I hadn't realized how long it's been
I hadn't either.
Since we were face to face.
Yeah, this last Saturday, I sat in on your show, Waking Up with Alan, and then we filled in for BK on the Air, and as best we could figure, it has been since February since we've been in the same room.
Yeah, that's crazy, because we see each other on Zoom once a week. We chat all the time. Yeah. We're talking all the time. We leave messages or voice messages, so it feels like I'm around you. It didn't even hit me. I'm like, geez, it's been since February since we were in the same room.
Yeah, like we have had a ongoing text conversation for like 4 years. So, but yeah, that realization of how long it's been because of this crazy COVID crap. It has been since February, as best I can tell. And just think of the stuff that we've had go on since then, just nationally and personally. And it's really amazing.
Well, I guess we'll leave it at this right now. I feel good about still the direction we're heading. I'm feeling positive that the innovations and the work being done in the private sector, a lot of the pharmaceuticals and companies that develop either treatments, alternative treatments and techniques and pharmaceuticals, as well as, of course, the vaccine, that we're going to be okay. It's just, you still got to do what feels right for you and yours. We're not advocating one thing or another, save for I don't believe in a government mandate to rule my life. I'm not about to give up my freedoms. I'll do what I think is right for me and those around me based on the conditions in which I live.
Yeah, for some reason it's falling out of favor, but personal responsibility is a
that
real
word
important thing. Yeah. Yes, that word, that poisonous word.
Well, before we bring our guest on, anything else going on this week we need to recap for the audience since the last time we chatted?
Well, one thing that I was realizing is we've now wrapped up hockey. I think we've wrapped up basketball. We're in the playoffs for Major League Baseball, and the Falcons season is basically over, even though the NFL's just getting going, and college football's just started. So, and the Falcons are playing on Monday Night Football tonight. So yeah, it's really good to see that we've gotten through hockey. We've gotten through basketball without any huge problems. I think we're through basketball. We're close. And then we're in the playoffs and headed for the World Series in baseball without seeing any real major issues. So that's reassuring.
Yeah, the only thing with the NFL, we got to keep an eye. This is the week we're recording when the Tennessee Titans had a couple dozen players or so.
Yes, yeah.
All of a sudden. So we'll have to wait and see how that shakes out. But, they are all young. They're all in the age range of a 99.997% survivability rate per the CDC. So that age range, yeah, it may take them out for a while. It may make them feel bad. It may give them mild symptoms. It could run the gamut, but they have a very, very good chance of recovering and getting back on the field.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So hopefully that'll happen.
All right, well, let's enough of us. Nobody cares about us anyway. They care about the guests. So let's do it. Let's part the curtains. Let's strike up the band. Let's get a warm round of applause to our very special guest joining us today in the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge, Steve Winslow. Steve, welcome.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. It is okay to address you two as gentlemen, isn't
Well, we use that term loosely around here.
Yeah. Well, then I feel like I found my long-lost cousins. I'm fitting right in already.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
I was going to say, you can call us anything you want to. Whether it's accurate or not is a whole different story.
We have a lot of accolades.
You can bleep quickly here, right?
Yes, we bleeps, yes. I would say we have lots of accolades, most of them of the 4-letter variety. So,
Oh, perfect. But seriously, thank you for having me, gentlemen.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, first off, if you can't tell by hearing that voice, that is a broadcaster's voice. There's just something about, you can tell someone who's comfortable on the mic, comfortable talking and relaying information. So, Steve, the opening question for you is, you've had a career thus far in broadcast, whether it's sports, news, traffic. How did it start? At what point did you get drawn toward an open mic?
It was a long, cold day in northern New England. Oh, I'm sorry. That was Ted Knight. I'm sorry. That's not me. No, seriously. It actually did get started in somewhat of a fashion like that. I was born up in southern New England, south of Boston and north of Providence, Rhode Island, in the late 1960s. And I had an uncle, my mother's brother, who was a journalist with a middle market newspaper. And he was an award-winning journalist, and I had a chance to follow him growing up. And between watching him write articles for his newspaper and seeing him at home in his house with all these radio scanners for police departments and fire departments, I said to myself, back then, this would be a great thing to do if I got older, if I don't get to be a professional athlete. So I tried it as I was going through school and went into communications and English courses and media courses through my high school years in North Attleboro, Massachusetts. And as I approached high school graduation in 1986, I said, I think I would like to go into journalism. So I went off to a local college and majored in English, minored in communications, and went for 2 years while still wanting to be a professional bowler of all things.
Oh.
And yes, the big like, oh, really? Well, bowling, huh? No, but I had a hard time juggling the two, and I actually left college for a while and went to work with my father's moving industry while pursuing that bowling career. And I found out after a couple of years as an amateur that it didn't pay the bills quickly enough and that you might need something to fall back on. So I went to broadcasting school, the Connecticut School of Broadcasting at the Wellesley Hills branch in the early 1990s, after hearing a local Boston sports talk show have a terrific tandem during the midday. And it was Dale Arnold and Eddie Andelman on a station up there, if I could use the call letters, WEEI in Boston. And I used to listen to them on my way home from my father's moving industry and going into school. And I said, I want to do this. I know I can do this. And the first day I walked into broadcasting school, it was like the parting of the Red Sea and the angels were singing in the background. Oh, this was it. I knew I was hooked, and I mastered the course as best as I could. And within weeks of finishing up at the broadcasting school, I had a chance to work at a local AM radio station, just a field goal kick away from the New England Patriots home in Foxborough, Massachusetts, and was a producer for a sports talk show there. Now, that's a stretch. Alan, Walt, you can address to this very clearly. When a station powers up an hour after sunrise and power's down completely before sunset, you know you're not going to have a lot of listeners. But that's where I got my start, and I was a producer for a sports talk show there on AM 1170 for about 2 years, and was given the chance to work on the Saturday show. So I brought in one of my great friends from high school. His name is Keith Lanny, and he was a Syracuse grad from telecommunications and cinematography, and we were both avid sports fans. We played baseball together in high school, and we played a bunch of other sports. Heard Walt mentioning hockey and basketball and all those. Played all those sports growing up with a father who had a degree in physical education. I couldn't avoid it. And I just fell in love with talking sports with him, and he and I did that for about 2 years. We got to do some high school football, and while doing this, the news director at that station was given a job at his previous station a little further up the road in Milford, Massachusetts. And when he was there, said, "Listen, Steve, we actually need someone on Saturday mornings to do some news. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Well, I've never done news, but that's what I went to school for. Let's give it a try." And that's where everything started to snowball into a 25-plus broadcast year career.
Wow.
Well, here's the thing I want to open with, because you mentioned, sort of tongue-in-cheek, a small station, but one of the things I've noticed in my career, and I've talked to a lot of people, those smaller stations, you learn how to do everything, and that makes you far more valuable later in your career.
That is so true, Alan. And that's exactly what happened with my career. I started off as a producer, worked up to be a talk show host, but then, as I just mentioned, went into a newsroom at another local station where they were on 24 hours a day and had a lot of local news information and heavily reading obituaries. That was their big moneymaker, was reading the obits at the end of every newscast. And I learned to do that. And then from there, I actually got a break with someone listening into the area that knew in Providence, Rhode Island, they had a opening for a producer on weekend evenings. So I've now gone from producing a sports talk show during the day, during the week, while working full-time, to doing news at another station on Saturday mornings, to producing at a bigger station, which was WPRO in Providence, Rhode Island, on weekend evenings. And I was finally getting a paycheck. That was great. But I learned to do so much in production, with breaking news, with play-by-play and two-way talking, similar to what we're doing right here. It was immeasurable as to how much I learned from just those early jobs in these radio stations. And you get to, as you said, Alan, you get to do so much at a smaller station. It's almost a lost art in this day and age.
One of the things that I have tried to impress on my kids is that whatever job you take, my oldest daughter's wanting to be a teacher, and she just got her first pre-K teaching job while she's in college. And I just said, learn everything you can. If there's something you've got to stay late for, come in early for, do something on a Saturday, whether it's figuring out how to schedule the bouncy house that needs to come for the fall festival, you do that because you want to be as valuable to your employer as you can. And like Alan said, starting at one of those small stations where you're answering the phone, where you're, reading the lunch menu for the local high school, those are great opportunities.
That's true, Walt, because you do diversify your skills and you're able to just see everything in a different perspective than you would have just coming out of school in something that you personally like or passionate about. And that's what happened as I went into other jobs. I went to work as a news anchor in a station in Worcester, Massachusetts, or as we say up there, Worcester, Massachusetts, and worked there for a couple of years while I was also eventually getting into the Boston market to help working with some other offside radio stations throughout New England where they would do news minutes or traffic updates. And that's where I learned to get a balance. And thankfully that's helped out because when we moved from Boston to Atlanta in 2005, a job wasn't readily waiting for me, but there was one station that wanted to bring me in to work with them, but they were waiting for the job to actually be created. And it took a few months. So I learned to just balance things out and work at other jobs.
Well, that was a question I had because where you grew up, you were kind of midway between probably what is still the largest market in the country in the New York area, where you could have very easily shifted in that direction. But then you came south instead, which Atlanta is in the top 10. I think it's in the 7th biggest market in the country. Not a bad place to land if you don't want to shovel snow.
Well, that's just it. That was honestly one of the factors my wife and I had in moving was we do not want to shovel snow every other day when it's 3 to 5 inches a day.
Oh.
And it was, and when you're a news director, and at the time I was a news director at another station in Brockton, Massachusetts, I had to get up at 3 a.m. to just shovel snow for an hour because we didn't make enough money to buy a snow thrower. And my wife said, no, the heck with this. I have a job opportunity being presented to me in my career, as she works in IT and the medical field. And they're allowing me to go down to an interview. I said, hey, maybe it's a sign. Let's take a look and see what happens. And it was the first time that I had actually took a second look at a career. And I went down to Atlanta initially to work in the bowling industry, as I mentioned before, trying to become a professional bowler. I got a job at a bowling center in Kennesaw, Georgia, while I was waiting for this other job in Atlanta to open up when we moved. And my wife had her job waiting for us. We found a beautiful house, and the boys were settling in very nicely. But I was still waiting to get onto the air for a couple of months while this job as an air transit reporter, reporting about Hartsfield-Jackson Airport's traffic and wait times, opened up for me over on another signal in Atlanta. And that led to some wonderful times in Atlanta radio before I came to this point where I am now.
So when you were growing up, just as a quick aside, the Boston sports market had to be a great place to be because you had the Celtics doing well. The Patriots at the time, I guess, were not great, but the Red Sox were good and the Bruins were great. So you had a huge sports market there. Was that a big temptation to stay and stay in that market, or did you kind of see the writing on the wall and say, now we need to get out?
That's a great question, Walt. That was a key factor in why I was reluctant at first to move when we were first getting settled and having our kids growing up in Boston, because the sports scene was terrific. We were 5 minutes from Foxborough Stadium where the Patriots play, and I had just watched them win their first Super Bowl with Tom Brady at the helm. And I'll stop there for now because I don't want to offend anyone from Atlanta. But
well, I mean, he was one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. So, I mean, it's hard to...
Yes, but he was just becoming that quarterback when this decision for us came in 2005. But it was difficult only for the sense that we weren't certain what was waiting for us in Atlanta, but we knew what we had in Boston, and the pro sports scene was terrific. But I was technically a news director at that time, so I wasn't working in sports, but I was doing a couple of high school games here and there, scattered amongst some friends that worked in the industry. And I looked at Atlanta and I said, there's a lot of opportunities there, like college football, and soccer is a big thing for the youth down there. And I said, this is a great chance to look at something to expand my career with. And thankfully that worked out because I was able to do something with the sports scene here in Atlanta at that station that I started as an air transit reporter, doing a high school football show where I was covering the Friday night games and reporting about all the games on Saturday morning at our station. And it actually brought us a few Gabbies. So I think I made the right choice to move when we did and waiting as long as we did. I had worked 15 years in the Boston and Providence markets when we finally relocated in 2005.
So the question I have is, were you taken aback by how much the South is embedded in not just college football, but high school football?
Actually, no. I was prepared for it because a couple of the broadcasters up in Boston that I worked with in the high school level were doing games for Harvard, and working for other schools in the area, including Brown University in Rhode Island and also UConn football. And they told us it is a different beast altogether. And I grew up in a football town. North Attleboro, Massachusetts is known for its high school football. It's basically a middle level team, like a Division III would be 5A here in Georgia, where we live now. So we were familiar with football being big, but I was preparing for it to be massive because I know how big college football is just from the rivalry between Georgia and Georgia Tech.
So when you came down here, because we do high school football, and to me, the high school football broadcasts we do are what most small stations around the country would be considered a college game. We have on-site reporters, right. We've got play-by-play, we've got color, we've got remote, we've got a producer in studio. We're capturing, somebody else has a job of doing nothing but capturing highlights for the halftime show and the post-game show. You know, it's a team of 8 and 10 people to make it happen every Friday night.
Yeah, and that was the thing I was preparing for. We had 2 or 3 people on our radio broadcast crews where I was working through the 1990s and the turn of the millennium. And I worked briefly in my area in the Attleboro, Massachusetts area with a cable group that had 4 camera operators, 2 play-by-play announcers in the booth, 1 on the sidelines. And I would fill in as a sideline reporter for about a year there, just enough to say I did it. But I found that, as we mentioned before, gentlemen, the way you work in this industry and do so many different things makes you valuable. It actually helped when I started to do high school football in Georgia, doing all of those things, because the show I did was literally just a 5-minute segment of recapping all the scores throughout Metro Atlanta and North Georgia while highlighting one game. But I was reporter, I was producer, I was editor, I was basically errand boy to go get water for myself during the halftime breaks. I did it all. And it made you laugh, but that's how I looked at it. And my boss actually, when he heard the first edit of our program there, he said, "Do it again." I'm like, "What?" He said, because he's from North Carolina, has that drawl. He said, "Please do it again. I love what you did. That was perfect." I'm like, "Every week?" He's like, "If you want." I'm like, "Okay, yes, sir. I'll do it. I'll do it." And I produced the Saturday High School Football Scoreboard show for Talk 920 in Atlanta for about 4 years. And we took home 3 Gabbies during that time. So I was very blessed. But knowing ahead of time how big high school and college football was, I had to step up to the plate.
The next question I have is, when did you make then the move from sort of the mid-market size stations to what is considered the major station? Was there a step in between? Because Atlanta, as far as talk, as far as sports, I mean, there are a couple of dedicated sports stations, but I don't think there's a bigger talk station in the Southeast than WSB. So I'm curious, when did that transition occur for you?
Well, I'll be honest with you, Alan. I was blessed when we moved here from the Boston area to Atlanta. That was the big jump for us. I had worked in a middle market station for 3 years as a news director while filling in as the high school football analyst. And I asked the general manager and the morning show host, who ironically enough has a very popular name in the media industry, of Bergeron. His cousin is Tom Bergeron, that we know on Dancing with the Stars and other things. But Charlie Bergeron looked at me and told me, he said, "Steve, this is basically all you and I have right now. This is about as far as we're currently going." He said, "Look around. See if you can try to find something else." I said, "Well, you're already doing the weekends up at WBZ in Boston, which is the big station up there." He was the weekend sports anchor when he wasn't the full-time GM at this station. So I knew that it was limited access to major market radio after having produced at Worcester and Providence markets and having done a dribble of some reporting in Boston, having my morning show host being the weekend sports anchor at the #1 station in New England. So that was when my wife and I really decided, let's take a look at Atlanta, see what's happening. And when we moved in 2005 and I was able to get on the air here, that was truly the jump.
All right. So, and Walt, I know you love jumping in on this too, because you have been a listener of WSB much of your adult life, if not your late teens. It becomes something that some people gravitate toward just to get the traffic, because that's how I got hooked into talk radio. I was like, well, I'm driving to Atlanta every day from Northwest Georgia. I better listen to see if I have to take a separate route or if there's something that's going to make me late. But, you know, when it comes to WSB, there's a lot of hats to wear there as well. Yeah,
that was the thing. When I was actually in transit from the radio station I just mentioned doing the sports and the air travel, I came across mutual people we know in this business, Pete Spriggs and Doug Turnbull at WSB, while at the Atlanta Motor Speedway during race weekend.
Oh, yeah.
In 2011. And it was ironic because we had a mutual friend that I knew from the bowling world that Pete Spriggs knew, named Mark DeSantis. And he recommended that I talk with Pete about coming to work at WSB, doing something. He said, "I don't know what's available, but Pete could tell you." I said, "Okay, well, I'd love to meet him sometime." And he said, "Well, we're going to the races this weekend." And I said, "Well, so am I." And I told this friend, and lo and behold, this is when you know fate steps in, because guys, sometimes it's just meant to be. We went to the camper area around Atlanta Motor Speedway on, I think it's turn number 3. And we parked our camper there. And we look over to our left, not one camper, but 2 over, and it's Pete Spriggs and his friend Mark DeSantis and their families all there. And I'm just looked at my wife and I said, "That's Pete Spriggs from WSB." She's like, "You mean the guy that they talk? You mean the bit?" And I'm like, she's stumbling, and I don't get her to stumble very often, but she did that time. And I said, "Yes." She goes, Bring them over some food. Go talk with them. Make yourself useful. I said, okay, I'm going.
Come on, dummy, get it together.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't do something stupid.
Okay, I won't trip as I'm bringing the food, but I remember bringing over some burgers and I think it was some brownies and other things that the other family we were with had made. And I went over and introduced myself, and Mark was there, and he introduced me to Pete Spriggs, and it just felt like a glove fitting over your hand. It was just a perfect fit. And like 15 minutes later, Doug Turnbull, who was in between races, had come over to talk to Pete about work and introduced me to Doug Turnbull. And that's when I actually met Doug Turnbull for the first time. And he, of course, is the afternoon anchor of traffic reports on 95.5 WSB.
Yeah, the current, I guess they call him now the traffic manager of the Triple Team Traffic Center. And it's just, which is, by the way, a 24/7 operation, just traffic alone in the Atlanta market.
I was going to say,
exactly.
I was down at WSB with Alan one night, and he said, you got to see this, and took me into the traffic center. And I mean, as a longtime listener to WSB and all kinds of radio stations, walking in there and just seeing what that operation takes is really mind-boggling.
I have to admit, I was taken aback the first time I took the tour as I was interviewing for the job in 2012 to work at the traffic center. I walked down, and Kara Lee, who's on Mix 98.5 as the morning show producer, was the liaison between the front office and Candace Presley, who was the assistant PD at that time for WSB. And I'm walking down, and we're walking down what I call Radio Row. Alan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And there's 5 radio stations, main studios, all set up next to each other. And I just looked, I said, I'm used to seeing 2, maybe 3 in the same building, never mind in the same row.
Right.
And that was my first awestruck moment in radio in itself, because I'm thinking, okay, this is it. This is the big time. This is Cox Media Group. Here we go.
Yeah. No, I tell everyone, it's been, I've been doing fill-in work. I've been involved with WSB for over 5 years now. And I still feel like you talk about the angels parting and hearing the singing, like when Clark Griswold finds his tree in the field. I mean, I feel like that every time I pull into the parking deck. I'm like,
yes.
I feel like it's a blessing and a privilege to even be allowed in the building. I still feel that way 5 years later.
Alan, I was doing it for 8 years, and I can say, honestly, it felt like you were coming from the locker room when you're in that parking lot, heading into the main stadium, when you walk into the hallway and into the newsroom and Radio Row for all of the Cox media stations in Atlanta. It's truly how I felt every time. I'm like, okay, gearing up, pumping up, time to go, time to work, time to do a traffic report. Here I am. And as you walk in, it's like, whoa, the crowd roars.
Well, and I'll tell you, Steve, I don't know that people in your business appreciate this all the time, but as I walked through the bay there, I'm seeing names of reporters who have been covering stories in Atlanta for 40 years. And yes. I'm thinking, these people have basically reported the history of the city I grew up in. And everything from the Atlanta child murders case to bank robberies to elections to tragedies and the Olympics. And,
yes.
The Falcons going to the Super Bowl, the Braves going to the World Series. The amount of history that has been observed and reported in that room is just amazing. And it's almost like, in some ways, walking into a living museum for me because of what's going on and the information that they're handling. And it really is an amazing, amazing business.
It truly is, Walt. And I honestly felt that just being in the traffic center, that you're becoming a part of history when we were covering events such as Snowmageddon, when that hit and everyone was all hands on deck, staying in the building or in a nearby hotel 24 hours a day for days on end as we were trying to get a lot of those commuters off of the expressways that were iced over. And then again, when the I-85 bridge collapse occurred just north of Georgia 400 in Atlanta, and that rerouted traffic into total mayhem for months. Having just going into that night afterward, having reported that during the day with Mark Aram, Doug Turnbull, and I believe it was Alex Williams breaking that story. It was amazing that we are living these life-altering historical events firsthand and bringing that information to the people at the moment it happened so that they could be safe. And that's what I think I took personal pride in when I was working in that traffic center, was the fact that I was trying to help others to be safe, to be informed and to be alert to what they need at the moment it happens. Because let's face it, in social media, unless you're streaming live or in television and you're seeing something happen at that moment, radio is the quickest way to find out something to the second because it's eyewitness accounts and it's instant information.
For those people who are listening who are either from out of the country or from another city, Georgia snow is not like going to grandma's house at Christmas in New England. We get ice and we get I would say shitload, but this is a family show. We get a lot of ice. And
that's another thing to shovel all together.
That's right. And the traffic here on a good day, I mean, you can be 1 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon and all of a sudden you're just sitting on one of the major interstates. If we get the least amount of snow and ice, it'll be like a skating rink all over the city. And it is a unmitigated disaster.
But one thing I will say, and Steve, you can attest to this and Walt, technically, since we've been living here and paying attention to this, the government and the infrastructure has started getting better about it, starting doing the pre-treatment, they didn't used to do anything. They just it'll be gone next day. Well, at some point when you've got such a mass migration to Atlanta, when Cobb County, when Dobbins blew up, and I remember Cobb County was reported as being the fastest growing county in the country, not just in Georgia, the country. I mean, we moved in '85 as a result of that. My dad's military got him down here when my mom's company relocated from Detroit. We grew so fast that I don't think people thought about how the roads were going to get clogged at that time. And there's a lot of areas that were not expecting that kind of growth. And they're just now, I think in some ways, building the roads they needed to 20 years ago to account for the volume.
Alan, that's a great point. I agree with that because when we moved here, we had heard about the 96 Olympics and how beautiful Atlanta was. And my wife got to see it firsthand in 2004, just before we decided to move here. And we realized it was a gorgeous place to go. And we moved to Cobb County. I'll openly say that. We moved there thinking this was going to be the best fit, not thinking there might be an inch or two of snow once or twice a year here. And what is in the works to take care of this? And sure enough, listening to traffic reports at that time, knowing how hectic it can be just on morning and afternoon commutes, never mind during inclement weather, we realized that we needed to be prepared and plan for long travel times. And I don't even think the first year we were there, we were quite ready for what we experienced.
No, and coming from the north, I'm sure you kind of thought, snow, I've gone through snow all my life and I've been driving on it for 15 years. And then you end up on the ice rink that is I-75, and it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, I can say, Walt, I actually took my driving test in early January 1985 in Boston, or outside of Boston. There was 1 inch to 2 inches of slush, which is melted ice and snow and salt all mixed in on the roads. I was hoping that they would have been cleared for my test. The last thing any 16-year-old needs is to have a hazard on the road everywhere you go, right? Never mind, throwing this into the monkey wrench for your first road test. But I actually drove through the slush, passed my test because I didn't skid. I didn't hit any curbs. I didn't hit any hydrants, didn't hit any trees or dogs, nothing like that. And I was amazed that they just took me around the block 2 times and said, if you can make it through this, you can make it through anything. There's your license. Great.
There you go.
Thank you.
See, I did mine in March of '85 in Georgia. And the big thing for me was, watch out for the dead skunk. Watch out for the dead possum.
Oh, my goodness. No, I didn't see too much of that. Skunk occasionally in the summertime up in New England you might see, or, a possum here and there, but not during the wintertime. So that's got to be amazing to see in March down here.
Well, let me pull back to the comment you made, Steve, on radio. And I do find this to be something that I get asked a lot. I think anybody in this business, if you have kids, teachers find out, they say, can you come talk at career day or come talk to our, and they always want to know, with internet radio and satellite radio and you can stream anything anywhere, don't you think your job's going away? And I said, anytime there is a breaking news story, a natural disaster, something on the road, something happening in the world or in our own backyard, you know what everybody does? They turn to local radio, and that's what it's there for. It's the comfort. I've had the privilege of being asked to come in on the evenings when we've had either hurricanes come through with a lot of people with power outage or power out, or we'd have ice storms and people were dealing with when is their power coming back. and the number of callers who would say, it's just so good to hear your guys on the air giving us information. People are listening on their cell phones. They're hooking up their phones in their car to recharge off their car battery because they've been without power for 8, 10, 12 hours. Yeah. It's such an amazing thing to be shifted from news talk or sports talk to suddenly, hey, we're here for you. And if that doesn't give you a sense that you're in an amazing job, I don't know what it would take.
Alan, I can honestly say, having heard you do this on WSB in Atlanta and on other stations where you work north and west, that you do a terrific job of that. And it's exactly right. People have that sense that you're in the room with them. You're actually there with them to comfort them, inform them, and maybe even console them if you're actually getting the chance to talk to someone on the radio. Because I knew growing up, I was thrilled if I ever got to call into a local radio station and say, yeah, can you say happy birthday to my sister? And just being able to say that would be wonderful. And sure enough, the local hosts were very accommodating with things like that. And that's, I think, how I was drawn into radio while still wanting to be a journalist following in my uncle's footsteps, was because I had a local radio station, WARA, in Attleboro, Massachusetts, where I actually got my first full-time gig being the operations manager and sports director. And it was like a dream come true, because that's when I knew, okay, now I've at least made it. I know that I'm worthy of being behind a microphone, because they're allowing me on my hometown station to talk with them during evening commutes and during breaking stories. But I can honestly also say that it also has that difficult time, and Alan, you can address this, and Walt, I'm sure you've heard it many times. I know when tragedy strikes that we are that voice of comfort, but even during times like when 9/11 hit, I was working at a smaller station in Taunton, Massachusetts, and I was the morning show host at that time, and we had a special election prepared for that day to elect a new congressman in Massachusetts because the previous congressman had passed away, Joe Moakley. And it turned completely from what we were expecting to have into the tragedy that we remember at 9/11. But people were tuned in more at that point, I think, than at any other time in the station's history, because they know you're there instantly.
You know, it's funny you say that, Steve. I was at IBM when that happened, and they turned a TV on downstairs, but everybody at their desk had the radio on. And
really?
Yeah, it was really crazy, because they sent an email out and said, hey, we've just turned the TV on and we'll have, I don't remember if it was CNN or Fox or whatever, playing down here. And we did go down and watch for about 5 or 10 minutes. But there's something about radio that to me has always been more personal. And I don't know whether it's that it's more conversational. You take, the radio goes with you everywhere. If you go to a picnic, you're streaming your, radio station or whatever. It's in your car. It's at on your desk at work. There's something to me that's always been a little bit more relational about the radio versus TV. TV's always seemed a little, more distant, a little more plastic to me, where I've always felt that the radio personalities were more friendly and more personable. And I think that's one of the real strong points for radio sticking around. But also I think that with the way that network news is 24/7 and the way that so much TV and so much of that kind of entertainment is streaming, I could see TV news going away before I could see the radio news and news industry going away.
Well, I'll say from your mouth to God's ears. Let's hope that's the case, because I totally agree. I think that radio is that comfort. It's like that one-on-one relationship, because you can put the earbuds in like we have here in our podcast and just hear the one-on-one conversation. And you can get that sense that the reporter is talking just to you by hearing it, because there's not much of a visual distraction. Now, at the same point, the social media events are terrific because it can give you visuals that you may need as these events occur, but it may not be at the moment. But TV, you get the sense, I think, of being more of a broad version of the news. It's almost like when you're going into a movie theater and you get to see the widescreen compared to just watching a movie on your little handheld phone device. It's a different feeling. And I honestly think that that's the case with television compared to radio. It's a good thing to have. It's important to have, but it's a different feeling.
It's definitely a different medium, and I think because it takes place in the person's mind, because they don't have anything to see, there's more active involvement. Like your brain is literally paying more attention. It's easier to gloss over TV. oh, here comes a commercial, I'll walk out of the room or whatever.
Yes.
And it's not, again, it's a separate skill set. I don't know that I've ever wanted to be in front of a camera that way. I put me in front of a movie camera, give me lines to memorize, sure, but be a news host, I don't know that that's ever something I'd like to do. We all have to know where our limitations are. But what I was going to ask you, moving along this path in terms of the technology, and I know we're kind of catching up to where we are currently. Social media, I often describe as it's a hammer. You can either bludgeon somebody with it, or you can build a house with it. It in and of itself is not bad. It's how people use it. What have you seen in terms of the evolvement of news and talk and information in the now social media age?
Well, on my personal viewpoint, I've seen that it has become a more helpful tool to broaden the vantage point of getting information for people that are out and about, because they may not have a radio readily at their disposal where they work. If you're in a big warehouse and you're driving around on a forklift, you may not have a radio there. It may not be blaring in the background, but you may have your phone in your pocket. And if you have it on vibrate and you get an instant information update, that might be able to tell you, okay, I got to take a coffee break, something's up, and then find out, whoa, goodness, something like the president having an issue, such as with the COVID-19, or the election results are in. You get that social media content that can be readily available. At the same time, though, you want to find out to the second what's happening. That's when everyone, as you said, flips the switch to the radio when the crisis hits. And that's when they want to know instant gratification. But social media at the same time, I know has, from generations beyond ours, gentlemen, really impacted how millennials and others get their source of information on a daily basis. Because I have 2 teenage boys, one in college, one finishing high school this year. And I don't think, except for when I'm watching a special sporting event, they sit down in front of the TV for more than 10 minutes at a time. Why? That's because they're working on their phone 2 to 3 hours a day, and all the different clips, all the different social medias, all the different YouTube clips, all the different, outlets that they have to get what they want. And it's where the industry has gone over the last 10 to 15 years, I think, is the diversity of having different sources to get information. It's a benefit because you can get truthful news when you want it, even if you don't think the networks that you have are giving you what you want. You can go somewhere else to find out if something that happened truly happened the way you heard.
Well, it is interesting. At my house, I think I'm the only one on a day-to-day basis who watches live TV. And that's because while I'm getting ready for work in the morning, I'll watch the news and get the national news. At night, I usually watch, a national news program or sports. But other than that, everybody in my house is getting Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Plus. If they're getting news, it's all getting bumped to them as updates on their phone. And so it is interesting, and it is a radically changing market, and I think it's changing faster probably than it ever has. Would you agree with that?
Totally. As a matter of fact, I sympathize with the sales executives in this industry now more than ever, because not only do they have radio to sell or television to sell or the combination of two, now they have social outlets to sell, and they're competing with so many different other, entities in this industry. Everyone's taking a smaller piece of the pie where it used to be 2 or 3 chunks of either television, radio, or print. And now it's social media, downstreams, everything. It's just amazing. It's almost hard to keep up with.
Well, and it is kind of cool too that you can. I'm sorry, Alan. I keep stepping on you.
All right.
I was just going to say it's kind of cool that you can follow KTLA on Facebook and sit in Atlanta and watch, all the fires around LA and all the car chases. And so that'll pop up. And so for weird people like me, it's like, oh, cool, a car chase. So I'll just leave that going on my desk. But otherwise, you'd have just had to hear like a 5-second clip about that on the national news. So,
well, the thing I was going to weigh in on that, and I'm agreeing with everything that this conversation is leading us toward. I will tell you, one of the dark alleys that drives me insane for my area, what I want to call expertise, or certainly the area I tend to dabble in, is the explanation of what's going on. Because unfortunately, with social media, it is prepackaged in so many small little bites, and so much of it is clickbait, and so many people don't want to go read the whole story. They think they know exactly what's going on from a crafted headline that may or may not be anywhere accurate, or may change 18, 24, 36 hours later but they've already shared it. They've already retweeted it. They've already commented on it. It's already gotten likes and hits. And it's the misinformation is as easily spread as ever because of that.
Alan, that's an excellent point. And I think this phrase is a key that a lot of younger adults need to remember as they get older. Knowledge is power, and you can have the power of being knowledgeable, but you need to know how to gain that knowledge properly. And just by listening to one source that you find favorable may not always be the best way to do it. Listening to different sources that you may not agree with, just to hear what the other side is saying, often can be more knowledgeable and more powerful for you, because then when you hear the information you rely on at the source you rely on to get it to you, it may sound similar, and you may be able to get somewhere between this side being one fact, this side being another fact, and somewhere in the middle is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Right. And we have to remember, news, like everything else, is packaged to an audience. So they may shave off a piece of information here or there that they don't think as important to their audience that another audience is looking for. So you're missing pieces. It may not be intentional. It's just, hey, we've got a 5-minute news block to fill. What are we going to tell you? You've got to kind of be open to the idea that I should probably read this same story from 4 different places. If all 4 are exactly the same, then I've gotten the story. But there might be pieces here or there like, oh, I didn't know that they had this piece in the other story because it's in this one. And for me, I find myself reading news now more than I ever have in my life. I am reading sources overseas. I'm reading sources, blogs as new media versus your standard media. I'm following reporters on Twitter and Facebook, so that way they may have a breaking story, and I'm trying to keep up with what they're trying to say on their Twitter feed versus what will be then packaged on the nightly news. For me, it's exciting, but it's also disconcerting when so many people don't bother to get the whole story. And I feel like I feel like a salmon swimming upstream in the spring. I feel like everything's going against me. I'm trying to explain, and you got people saying, well, you're just a wrong person, or I hate you because you don't believe exactly what I believe. It's like, wait a minute. We're supposed to be talking here.
Yeah, I basically have learned after 25 years in this business, and I'm sure both of you gentlemen have as well on your side of things. I basically take the approach that Luke Skywalker did when he was basically trying to make his final stand. And once everything's fired upon him and just hit him, bombarded, all weapons firing on him, just look at his shoulder and just brush it off. Just roll with it.
Just go with it. Don't take it personally.
No. Here we go, Last Jedi.
Before I get to my last question, Walt, do you have anything else before we move to kind of closing out the interview segment?
Well, I think I could sit here and talk to Steve all night, so I'm going to give him a break. And
thank you.
But I've thoroughly enjoyed having you on, Steve, and I of course, have listened to your work over the years and look forward to seeing what you're doing next.
Oh, well,
yeah, that was actually the question that I was going to leave with is everybody wants to know, well, what's the next big adventure? Because there's always something around the corner. Sometimes fate opens a completely different path or door. We don't even know. But by doing all those jobs we mentioned earlier, makes us much more easily able to move from job to job because we have a much wider base of skill. So what's the future hold for Steve?
Well, Alan, if I could, let me use a philanthropical approach to this. I think it's the animated character known best to everyone in the world as Butthead when I say, okay.
Man, you are speaking our language.
I thought I might, because between all the years I've watched Simpsons and my sons wanting to see the reruns of Beavis and Butthead, I've seen just about everything you can on the gamut. I'm a Bugs Bunny fan myself, and I've always loved the animated cartoons there. But watching all these animated shows nowadays, you learn to just kind of absorb what's out there and just wait for the next thing to come. And I'll be honest with you, at this point, as we're recording this, I'm about to become an unrestricted free agent. So my options are wide open, and I'm looking to see what the future has to bring. And I'm actually looking forward with great anticipation to what's coming ahead of me.
It's both exciting and sometimes nerve-wracking, but the fact is, if you have that work ethic, and it sounds like, you had it early in your career, you can make and I want people to hear this. I don't know. I feel like that dad in me is coming out. Yeah. Hey, kids, if you learn to show up on time, they'll love you. But I mean, seriously, a work ethic and a willingness to do whatever job, even if it's a stopgap for 6 months, 12 months, do the job, do what you got to do. You never know what opportunity it opens up. You never know who you'll meet along the way. I never would have thought, if you had asked me in high school and college, are you ever going to have a career in radio? I'm like, radio? That's for people with like the deep voices and the wit and the humor. And, I'm just the goober that's going to write a poem or something over here. I never thought I'd be in this, and
Well,
it's
Alan,
amazing.
Yeah. That's the thing. If someone had told me when I was in grade school that you're going to be a traffic reporter reading maps and telling people where to go and just how to get there, I would have laughed, because when I took some of these Iowa skills tests in grade school, the worst skill I had, map reading. I couldn't tell which way was up unless it was facing straight up for north. I seriously had that problem growing up, but I actually learned between radio gigs here in Atlanta how to become more diversified. I had a truck driving job doing deliveries for HVAC warehouse wholesale company for 2 years. And that's how I learned the roads in Atlanta to perfection when it comes to the expressways. The side streets, no way. Still don't know them all. But the expressways, I got to learn because I drove on them for 2 straight years while transitioning into the traffic center at WSB. And that made me a better person. And as you said, the more you do, the more you work on, the more diversified you can be, the more valuable you become to a company, whether it's in media or elsewhere.
And every single thing you ever do is valuable, and those skills are going to come back to help you at some point.
I totally agree.
And you have to make sure you stay on it. And I agree too.
All right. Well, Steve, I know you've already agreed. We talked before the show that you're going to hang out with us. So we appreciate you being with us through the end of the show. We'll get to the next segment. So we're going to go over to Walt for a segment we like to call...
Bring out your dead!
Well, Alan, Steve, sad news. We have lost Raymond Allen Big Al Brownlee. He was born in 1931, a humble man. He died on September 21st, 2014. But I'm finally now just getting over the grief to be able to tell you about him.
Sorry, I don't mean to.
Oh, no, you're going to laugh.
No, I do.
He was born on December 30th, 1931 in McKees Rock, Pennsylvania. He was the youngest son of the late William Franklin Brownlee and, gosh, way down here, Lucille Beverly Fauntleroy Brownlee in King William, Virginia. Affectionately known as Big Al by his friends and family, he was a plumber by trade, a tremendous gardener, and avid hunter. He also enjoyed fishing and proudly displayed the stuffed barracuda he caught back in 1965, much to the dismay of his wife, Agnes Bargo Brownlee, to whom he was married for 24 years. He despised canned cranberry sauce, wearing shorts, cigarette butts on his driveway, oatmeal, loudmouth know-it-alls, Tabasco sauce, reality shows, and anything to do with the Kardashians. Can't blame him there.
Well, he's a bright guy there.
Yeah, absolutely. But Big Al had many loves, too. He loved his wife, who preceded him in death in 1990. He also dearly loved his children and grandchildren. He also loved milkshakes, fried shrimp, the Steelers, the Playboy Channel, Silky's Gentlemen's Club.
Now we know why they also call him Big Al, huh?
Yeah, there you go. Taking afternoon naps in his recliner, hanging out at the VFW playing poker, eating jelly beans by the handful, his hunting dogs, his favorite of which was Rip Van Winkle, a loyal beagle. Big Al was world-renowned for his lack of patience, not holding back his opinion, and his knack for telling it like it is. He was highly proficient at cursing. He liked four-letter words just about as much as four-wheel drive pickup trucks. He was a connoisseur of banana cream pie and a firm believer that ham sandwiches should only be served on Mancini's bread. He also told you the truth, even if it wasn't what you wanted to hear. He was generous to a fault, a pussycat at heart, and yet sugar-coated absolutely nothing. His fineness of spaghetti westerns was only surpassed by his love of bacon, beer, and peanut butter ice cream. I have no idea what that is. He finally reminisced about good friends, good drinks, and good times at the Tri-Valley Sportsman Club in Burgettstown. He was a longtime member of the Elks Club, and he was quite a teller of tales. Big Al's elaborate stories often punctuated with his phrase, "And that's when I kicked his ass."
Nice.
He was also on a first-name basis with the four horsemen of liquor, Jack, Jim, Johnny, and Jose.
I have never heard that phrase, but I'm on a first name basis with a couple of them myself.
I think we all are. Big Al had a strong belief in which he never wavered. Sorry about this, folks. Dog shit makes the best garden fertilizer. Heinz ketchup does not belong on a hot dog, and Penn DOT should be embarrassed by the never-ending construction, detours, and potholes on Route 28. He had a lifetime menage a trois with a homemade chili and Gas X.
No.
Oh.
He had a great fondness for sardines on crackers, stuffed cabbage, which he lovingly called hunky hand grenades, making turtle soup, and eating BLTs. His famous holiday eggnog had enough whiskey to grow hair on your chest. He took pride in his time served in the Navy on the USS San Marcos during the Korean War, often waxing nostalgia on the worst meal he had ever eaten, which was, you got it, creamed beef on toast, aka shit on a shingle.
Shit on a shingle, yes.
With a stink eye towards organized religion, Big Al was more spiritual than religious and enjoyed reading his Bible before bed each night and watching church on TV every Sunday morning. Big Al took fashion advice from no one. With his trademark V-neck white t-shirt and strategically coiffed comb-over, his comfort far outweighed any interest in the latest fashion trends. He was well stocked with white shoe polish to keep his tennis shoes looking pristine for prime rib dinners at Longhorn Steakhouse. Many thanks to the wonderful folks at Asbury Heights Nursing Home in Mount Lebanon. Family and friends are cordially invited to a celebration at life at noon for a mandatory shot and a beer and a final toast in Big Al's honor, the greatest dad in the world.
Aw, that was nice.
Yeah, that was a nice one. That's a nice change of pace. I mean, Big Al really lived it up, but he was also a nice guy, and his family really loved him for a change. So that was good.
It was just so surprising. A plumber by the name of Big Al. I
I
didn't
know.
see that coming.
It sounds like he had a heck of a diet that may have led to that nickname.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. Thank you for the obit of the week. Now we're going to go ahead and shift into some of our news items for the day. And Walt, we get to go right back to you because you always open us up with a bit of news, and you know it's true because
It's no bullshit.
Yeah, and this one comes to us from KOIN.com. Zane Sparling is the reporter who inked this gem. Irked by little press, Oregon libertarians hold nude rally.
whoa, that'll get some attention.
Yeah,
Although, have you seen many libertarians?
I know, it may be the wrong kind of attention.
It's like, why is it always the wrong people that want to take all their clothes off in public? It's like, put that away. I'm not even sure what that is.
Put it on. Put it on.
Please. Dear Lord.
Oregon libertarians bared a lot more than just their arms during a rally spurred by the lack of media attention and the third party in the election cycle. Gary Dye, the libertarian candidate campaigning against U.S. Senator Jeff Malarkey this year, helped organize...
Wait, Jeff what?
Merkley.
Oh, I thought I said Malarkey. I'm like, that's a great name for a
that
politician.
That would have been even better, yeah. I may have even said that as a Freudian slip. He helped organize a demonstration in the BOF on the multi-use path of the Glenn Jackson Interstate 205 bridge connecting Oregon and Washington between 1 and 3 p.m. on Saturday, October 3rd. Dye says, quote, "It's a result of libertarian candidates for office getting zero attention from the media this year. Whether I'm wearing any clothes remains to be seen." Dye said another organizer works at a strip bar that is in danger of closing due to the numerous state-imposed restrictions to her business, and that the event was being held to coincide with World Naked Bike Ride Day, which is actually held in June, according to the planners of the event, celebrated each year in Portland. 11 people said they attended the Libertarian rally on Facebook, and the other two organizers were listed as Dara Reynolds and Ashley Lynn. Dye admitted the rally was a naked bid for attention, but said that any shame belongs to the media, not those brave enough to walk buck naked in order to change our country from what Republicans and Democrats have conspired, colluded, and cooperated in turning it into, not the place where we want it to be. He continued, but it is shameful that libertarians have to do desperate things in order to get media attention. Dye actually did receive some media attention this year after the Republican candidate in the race, Merkley, and Joe Ray Perkins unsuccessfully sought to remove his name from the November ballot. Dye, an engineer, has challenged Merkley to several previous elections. Also in the race is Eugene teacher Abraham Tahir.
It's no bullshit.
So there's our Libertarian Party out getting the votes or whatever. or at least catching a cold.
I have this. One of the people who on Twitter said, "Now I see what this Libertarian Party is all about, but I'm not sure I like what I saw."
Saw a little too much.
Yeah, it was a little more in depth than I was expecting for an introduction to libertarianism. I was more or less talking about what is your kind of treatise and how do you differ. I didn't need the biology lesson, so well, we appreciate that. All right. Well, I've got one here perfect for the October timeframe as we are inching ever closer to Halloween. Man steals truck for an alien encounter, but then returns it because he felt bad. Bryce Gerald Dixon has been accused of theft and 3 attempts to escape an officer's custody. He told police he really needed the red pickup truck and that he returned it when he could. He said, "Look, I've got to get to the Coliseum to get on the flight so I can meet with the alien diplomats." Seems like a reasonable request to me.
Sure.
Dixon planned to drive the pickup all the way to the Coliseum, but upon feeling badly for taking the vehicle, decided to return it. The owner of the vehicle called it in stolen after leaving it unlocked for a quick stop at the store, calling 911. Police responded to the call and got to the scene to investigate. Once an officer arrived at the convenience store, he was then met by the owner of the truck. The owner told him the man suspected of taking it had just returned it and that he was running from the location. "Right over there, officer." Officers took off after the suspect. The suspect was taken to the hospital for an injury due to the owner of the truck punching him in the face after having returned his vehicle.
Oh, after he returned it.
After he returned it, he's like, "Hey, man, here's your truck back." Poof! "What you punched me for? I brought it back."
That's awesome.
Once in hospital care, Dixon tried to slip past officers several times. Dixon apologized to the police, but told them that the aliens needed him to get to the Coliseum. He has been booked into the Utah County Jail on suspicion of theft of a motor vehicle and for 3 counts of attempted escape. He won't be making it to the aliens, but at least the truck was returned.
It's no bullshit.
You never know what's going to happen around Halloween time, but apparently a guy in need of a vehicle wanted to meet his alien rendezvous.
Man, those aliens, they don't know their way around anywhere.
You would think with alien technology, they could just come get him.
Yeah, but, as we saw on Independence Day, they're really just not that advanced.
Oh, really? Is that what you got from Independence Day?
Well, I mean, we were able to tap into our own satellites and defeat them, so,
Oh, yeah, well, okay, we'll go with that.
All right, so I've got the next piece of news-ish. Suspect gave teller ID during bank robbery.
Oh, that's always good to do.
Yeah, this guy's a genius. From Franklin County, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, the Franklin County Sheriff's Office stated on Monday, June 4th, 51-year-old bank robbery suspect David William Menzer walked into Huntington Bank at 1880 Hilliard Rome Road. He approached the bank teller and handed over a note demanding money. The note read, "I have a gun." The teller handed him a stack of cash, including a die pack. He returned the die pack and placed it on the counter. Mesner, who was not satisfied with the stack of cash he received, demanded more money from the electronic cash recycle machine. The teller told Mesner that the machine required an ID card to withdraw money. The suspect handed over his driver's license.
He fell for it.
He is a genius. David was easily identified due to him giving his ID to the teller. A warrant was issued for his arrest, and he was subsequently arrested on June 15th. Mesner was charged with aggravated robbery, threatening with a deadly weapon, and he is being held in the Franklin County Correctional Center. Mesner is also accused of robbing 3 additional banks in the past couple of weeks, including PNC, the Heartland Bank, and the PNC on Hilliard Rome Road on June 12th.
It's no bullshit.
Wow. Someone is going to be incarcerated for a few years.
Yes, I would hope so. Even if for nothing else, just plain stupidity.
Just being stupid. Well, sir, if you want to get any money, we're going to need an ID. Oh, okay, hold on. I got my wallet right here.
Genius. Just pure genius.
It's like that story I mentioned a couple years ago with some idiot who stole from somebody else's trailer in a trailer park just as it was starting to snow, and the cops just followed the footsteps back to the other trailer.
Oh, my gosh. Brilliant.
Oh, These are not some of the brightest examples of humanity, are they?
No, they're not. I was hoping my dad would tell a couple of those stories last week, but we kind of ran out of time. But yeah, he had a very similar one where the guy actually used his mom's deposit slip to write the note on.
It's his note that he conveniently left with the teller.
Yeah, he gave it to the teller. So my dad's interviewing the teller and says, "Do you have any idea who committed this crime?" She goes, "Yeah, I do." He said, "Well, how?" And she said, "Well, here's the note, and it's on a deposit slip." So my dad and the other agents race over to this address and knock on the door. The lady answers, and she says, "Oh my gosh, what did he do now?"
Not a surprise to seeing police knock on the door, huh?
Dad's like, "I think we've got him."
I think we found him. Case closed.
Yeah, this took about 12 minutes. Let's go to lunch.
Yeah. All right. Well, I've got the last news story. Well, this may sound familiar only to you because you were on BK on the air with me, but it bears repeating for our podcast. We have a story here of some very intelligent African parrots in a zoo. So intelligent that they've picked up on the art of swearing. For example, and I will bleep this creatively afterwards, but I'll have to say it for now. "Ah, shithead, Polly wants a motherfucking cracker." Now, animals can be pretty smart sometimes. That's common knowledge to anyone who owns a dog or even a cat. But everyone's favorite pets aren't actually the brightest ones in the animal kingdom. They're actually kind of dumb as compared to, let's say, elephants or pigs or even octopus who have shown amazing problem-solving techniques. Well, there are also another group of animals that are surprisingly intelligent, and that would be birds. While most of them are famously feather-brained, there are some species who can display almost human-like intelligence. Case in point, a recent study found that corvids, that's a raven and crow and other things like that in that same category, possess the ability to analyze their own knowledge, something we've only thought humans are capable of. One more bird that possesses human-like features is the parrot. Parrots, like corvids, are famous for their ability to mimic human speech. They might not actually know what they're saying, but they can sound eerily human. Well, this ability landed a group of parrots in the UK into some hot water with the wildlife park they live in. The problem, it's not so much they're imitating people, but what they've chosen to imitate. Namely, 5 African gray parrots have started swearing like sailors to the point that the animal park has had to put them in timeout. They really hurling crude insults at innocent people. Well, where could they have gotten the idea? Well, they've learned from each other, apparently. The birds that have actually been fueling each other by repeating the foul phrases in front of one another from their previous lives have actually now increased the swearing vocabulary among all 5. The foul-mouthed avians were initially quarantined in the same room to stop them from spreading a possible disease. While there, they taught each other all of the nasty words that they'd been taught before. So by just a coincidence, we took in 5 in the same week that all had somehow had to be quarantined, and they all had a background as swearing birds. Now, if the swearing wasn't enough, the parrots are finding it funny. In fact, they have been found to actually egg each other on, trying to get them to say more foul language, because if they get people to laugh, they actually think that that's their reward, and so they keep doing it. So they've been using some operant conditioning here by the people who laugh at what's going on. But park officials say it is kind of funny, and yeah, sure, you can as adults laugh it off, but we have children here that come to the zoo, and we can't have that. We're not sure what necessarily triggers it, but once one of them swears, they all start a swearing fest that makes you feel like you're in the middle of a drunken brawl with a bunch of Navy sailors. So, what are they going to have to do? They are literally separating all 5 of the birds into 5 areas of the park, hoping that if one does get into a swearing fit, the others will be so far out of range, it won't kick them into the next gear, egging them all on, getting all 5 to start swearing nonstop.
It's amazing. It's astounding. But it's no bullshit.
So here you are, a story of swearing African parrots who have been seeing way too many Samuel Jackson movies.
That is absolutely insane. And the fact that they're influencing each other in this bad behavior is just incredible.
Ah, look at the dumbass. Ah, he's a unbelievable.
Well, I told you one of the places that we've gone to is the the Chattanooga Aquarium, and they have I don't know what it's called, aviary, where there are a bunch of birds.
Yeah, an aviary.
Yeah, and the birds there talk. And when I've talked about Heather on our podcast before, our middle daughter. The birds, by the time we got through there, were like, "Rack, Heather, stop it! Rack, Heather, come on!"
They were picking up on you.
Yeah.
Well, this is, by the way, folks who are longtime listeners, this is the child who is consistently being referenced in these stories of yelling things in public places that make Walt look bad.
Yes, constantly, absolutely, all the time.
What do you want to do, Dad? Beat me?
Yeah, in the grocery
That's
store.
my favorite.
Yeah. Then, do you want more of this? And she's pointing at the beer. People are like, that abusive alcoholic.
Awesome.
Great.
So the birds in that short period of time were already picking up on the Heather, stop it. Heather,
they
come
were
here.
all over it. And I'm sure to this day, if we walk through there, they'll probably say that.
Wow. All right, let's go ahead and move to our final segment of the show. It's our entertainment section, a section we like to say, what are you watching, what you reading, what are you listening to? So we'll give Steve a chance to collect his thoughts. We'll go to Walt first on the what you watching bit. What are you watching? Whether it could be a movie at the theater you've seen recently, maybe something you're binging, finally catching up, something brand new, or maybe something really old on MeTV or something like that. So what are you watching this past week?
Well, this week, Netflix dropped the final season of The Good Place. Have you watched that at all?
I've watched them all except the last 2 seasons. I love that as a comedy, as a modern comedy. You know, I have my issues with some shows that are considered hit comedies of the late, 10 years. I think The Good Place is fantastic. I think it's witty. It's awesome. There's still some substance there. There's heart, and I think it's great.
I agree with you. I think it's one of the best comedies in decades. Well, not in decades, but it's one of the best in a long time. Ted Danson is absolutely genius in it. I think you see how great a comic actor he really is. And the whole cast really is just strong. They've got great chemistry. Kristen Bell's in it. William Jackson Harper is just great. So if you have not watched this is a great show. Again, all I think it's 4 seasons or 5 seasons are now on Netflix, and it is a great show to binge. I almost hated when the seasons ended and you had to wait.
Yeah.
And it was really one of those. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. And then let
me interrupt real quick. Steve, have you seen that at all? The Good Place?
I've caught glimpses of it, and I think it's a terrific show. And like you were saying, Walt, Ted Danson just nailed his character perfectly in that. The episodes I've seen, and I think it's a great feel-good type of comedy that we don't see that often anymore. And I thought it was great. The couple of episodes I watched were of the final season, and I loved it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just the jokes are clever. There's not just stupid humor. There's some clever play with the lines when they can't swear in The Good Place, but they're trying to.
Yeah.
And I keep wondering how many times do they have to do another take because they accidentally said the word they're supposed to say instead of the word that comes out.
Yeah. And they're always fork this and yeah, that's really great.
What the fork? Why do I say fork? I don't want to say fork.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and then shoe. I mean, it's really great. And the one thing I also like about it is there is kind of that moral element to it where it makes you look in the mirror a little bit and say, what kind of person am I? If that was a standard, do I make the cut? And it is. It's a really well written, well acted. I really have enjoyed that show.
Like I said, I think it's got heart.
Yeah, I think so. The cast genuinely loved being with each other. I saw the wrap-up episode of that show when they were talking about how things were and how sad it was that everyone had to go their separate ways because they genuinely loved bringing that show to the viewers.
Wow. Well, you definitely got that sense. I'm glad to hear that because you really felt that was the case. So, and I think, like I said, I think it's 5 seasons and they ended it well. You know, you look back at some of the great TV shows like MASH and Cheers and some of those, and how did they end? Most of them, you're kind of like, I mean, even Seinfeld, which I loved, at the end of the last episode, I was like, no, that wasn't great. But there's no real clear end to that. But this one, I thought they ended it perfectly. So
absolutely. All right, what else you got?
The other one I've just started watching the last couple of days, I still don't know how I feel about it, is Letterkenny. It is a Canadian comedy. The place I keep hearing about it is our good friends over at Radio Labyrinth have talked about it a lot. And I can kind of see why people like it. I'm going to give it a shot. I'm about 2 or 3 episodes in. It hasn't really grabbed me yet. I mean, there are funny parts, but I don't know that I totally get it yet. But that's available on Hulu. And again, it's called Letterkenny. It remains to be seen. I'll kind of do what you've done over the last few weeks, Alan, with Next Generation, and kind of let people know what I think as I go. I may not make it through this one, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Well, not every show's for everybody. That's why there's so many shows to choose from.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So those are the 2 big ones. Anything else? Any movies you've been to? Have you seen Tenet yet?
I have not seen Tenet. I keep wanting to go.
What is wrong with you?
Well,
Go
for
see
one thing,
it.
the weather's been so nice, it's hard to justify going to sit in the theater for 2 hours. So,
well, you got to go see it. If you need somebody to go see it with, let me know.
Okay, yeah, I'll holler at you. We'll go see it.
All right, Steve, let's go over to you. As far as what are you watching? What can we let the audience know in the mind of Steve Winslow is worth paying attention to on TV?
Oh, you don't want to go there, do you? You don't want to be inside my mind for that, do you really?
What was that in the obit, the Playboy channel? Wait, what?
Yeah.
No, not in this house, no. I'm still trying to catch up to some of the shows that I saw 10, 15 years ago that were long hits, because working as a traffic reporter on the overnight shift for several years, you don't have a luxury of sitting at home at night and just unwinding. You have to wait until 4:30 in the morning when everyone else is waking up. So, yes, I'm actually just catching up now on the final season of The Big Bang Theory. That was a show I fell in love with since the first episode, when Leonard basically said, she will be my wife and we will have beautiful children. And then, of course, Sheldon Cooper says, yeah, in your dreams. But that's how it ended. So I'm just happy catching up on the final season of The Big Bang Theory on reruns and downloads. But basically, the other thing I do is I don't have a chance to watch a lot of fiction, comedy, movies, or TV. But 2 things I did in the last week, gentlemen, was, number 1, I got to sit with my kids and my wife and my oldest son's girlfriend, who is now staying with us from Wisconsin. And for the first time, we all watched a movie together. We watched The Princess Bride.
Oh,
yes.
Classic.
Yes.
Now,
the girlfriend had never seen it before.
I got to ask this question before you go into it. I got to ask this question.
Okay.
You've probably seen it before.
Yes.
Your wife probably saw it. But was this the first time some of the other people in the room saw it?
That's what I was just getting to, is the fact that the girlfriend of my oldest son had never seen it before. She's 19, going on 20, and she had never seen some of the older movies. So it was funny watching her. My wife and I were both looking out of the corner of our eye as we were kept hearing, that's inconceivable, every time, to see what her reaction was. And she kind of just went like crickets, background chirping.
Oh,
what?
gosh.
I'm like, oh, no. But then, of course, when Indigo Montoya, who killed my father, prepared to die, came up, she thought that was hilarious. And my oldest son, who loves dry humor, Monty Python and the like, he was just rolling with that. So we had a great time watching The Princess Bride, because that's one of my wife's actual favorite movies of all.
It's fantastic. And it is I can attest, at least in our family, it's multi-generational.
Yes.
My oldest daughter loved that movie so much that she wanted it one year on Christmas when it came out. It's a Blu-ray. And so we've got it on Blu-ray. And it's such a timeless movie. It works. It doesn't matter what age you are when you've seen it.
Right.
It's just a great movie.
I mean, who doesn't know the line, have fun storming the castle? Come on, everybody knows what that is.
Well, Steve, we took a big risk, Alan and I, and we
Yes,
brought
we
our
did.
wives into the studio, and we broke down The Princess Bride for a podcast.
Yes,
Oh.
in 5 chunks. We had them join us for a couple of multi-session episodes. We broke the movie out into 5 pieces and went all the way through it. So it's like The Princess Bride along with The Princess Wives. We broke down that movie.
Oh,
It was a lot of
amazing.
fun.
Oh, I'll have
It
to
was
check
awesome.
that out. I will have to watch those. That sounds wonderful.
Oh,
it
you would
was
love it. And
great.
right now, they're on our Patreon page. That normally that's our engine to help fuel the cost of the show.
Yes.
But we've made the episodes free for the COVID season. We were trying to give people an outlet to have something to go listen to. And that paywall is going to go up here shortly to go back, because we need to, continue to fund things like, hosting fees and website fees, things like
And
that.
shopping.
But go check it out. Yeah,
Oh,
check it
definitely.
out. There's 5 episodes of The Princess Bride.
Yep, I'll have to do that. But the other thing I've been doing real quickly is I am being a news junkie and being a sports fanatic. I have been watching so much live sports without any fans in the seats. It's amazing. I was watching the National Hockey League playoffs and the Stanley Cup Finals, as you mentioned, Walt. I love hockey, and that's kind of one of the things I wanted to do was growing up was being a play-by-play for the Boston Bruins, and never happened, obviously. But
well,
I was
funny because
watching.
that's what I wanted to do too. I'm a huge Bruins fan.
Are you really?
I am. Yeah.
My goodness.
I'll bore you with that later, but
yeah, true. But the fact that I was watching the Stanley Cup Finals without any fans in the stands was incredible. So I was just taking every game, and even if it wasn't the team I was following, I watched so many of those games just to see the reaction of the players, the coaches, to see how they would interact with each other without having thousands of fans to support them. So I thought that was just amazing.
Yeah, I loved it. You love it the real way, but I thought they did a great job. I thought the NHL for once came through and really did a great job.
Yeah, for once, Gary Bettman didn't get booed when he handed off the Stanley Cup to somebody. That was amazing, too.
I kept thinking they should pipe in booing.
That would have been perfect.
Get a bunch of us on Zoom and let us boo his side.
That would have gone over very well. Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, this is the one thing we're missing when the Atlanta Falcons, you hear that piped in sound on the TV. It's like, wait, where are all the boos? Where it doesn't sound real?
Isn't that a normal occurrence anyway with the Atlanta Falcons?
Exactly. That's why it feels weird when they're cheering. I'm like, wait a minute.
Instead,
it's not the Atlanta fan base.
Yeah, you could just stand outside and hear the whole city groan as they throw away leads.
Which is why I've stopped saying 28-3 very often. I sympathize with those Atlanta fans. You've been through it.
Oh, it's brutal.
Yes.
Just brutal.
But, once you've gone through that, it's really easy to just drop them. So, no kidding.
Well, I did that as a Red Sox fan for so many years. I can relate to that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to what I'm watching, this is kind of a little repetitive, but I am at least advancing. We just got started into Longmire season 3, so got 2 seasons behind us. We're a couple of episodes into season 3. I've definitely been watching the build of the underlying story that took a little while to get there, and now I'm really hooked. It's almost like the stories that are happening in the episodes are less. I don't really care about them as much. I know you're going to solve the crime. I want to see the pieces of the underlying big story arc that they've been slowly dropping. So I've been really enjoying that. And I am finally now, because you got to remember, TV shows, for all you young kids out there, when a season of a TV went, there'd be sometimes 22 to 26 episodes of a show. So when you're binging something, it's not these 10 episode seasons. So I just finished Star Trek The Next Generation season 5, and I just started season 6. So 2 more seasons left to go to knock out that series before I decide to queue up the classic Trek to go with our guest we had a couple of weeks back, Tom Taylor's podcast of the ABC of the original Star Trek series. That is a very good podcast to listen to, which we'll get to in the listening segment. So those are the 2 things I'm watching right now.
All right,
Walt, reading anything right now? Any good books? Any periodicals crossing your desk?
Well, just today, finally, I've mentioned this a couple of times, Jerry Seinfeld's new book, Is This Something?, finally hit my Kindle. So I will start that here today or tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to reading that. That will probably occupy me for a couple weeks. And just wrapping up that Bosch book that I've been working on for a couple weeks, and that's about it. I've got a big stack of books ahead of me, but those are the 2.
Is that the
really
Black Echo that you're talking about?
Is that right?
That's the first one in the series.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. The Black Echo. Excellent book. Great read.
All right, Steve. Now you don't have to have something if you don't. We just put these 3 categories because it's all entertainment. But is there anything you're reading right now? Anything you'd recommend?
Well, besides reading ads in most newspapers and other publications, I actually picked up a book just a couple days ago that I would never have thought to look for. And the reason why, it was just, number 1, sitting around the house doing nothing but collect dust. But number 2, it was because my wife told me that my oldest son, Andrew, actually had this as a reference book for when he was taking a philosophy course up at Georgia Highlands College. And the book is called The Trolley Problem, or Would You Throw the Fat Guy Off the Bridge? It's a philosophical conundrum written by Professor Thomas Cathcart of Harvard University. He wrote it about 6 years ago. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this, but the book is based upon the logical viewpoint from several people involved with a created theory. And the theory was that a trolley car is careening out of control down a city street. And ahead of it are 5 workers. On a spur of right stands a lone individual. So there's 5 people on the road, 1 off to the side. You are the trolley conductor. What do you do if you can't control this? Do you veer the cart off the street and sacrifice 1 person? Or do you let fate take its course and let the trolley continue, possibly and likely wiping out 5 people? What do? You have a few seconds to react. What do you do? And the professor, Thomas Cathcart, actually asks from a different perspective of what philosophically we would all do in our own mind. I mean, morally, ethically, responsibly, what would we do? And it really makes you think. And I'm only about a third of the way through the book, but it has the different perspectives from people like the newspaper writer, who we can all relate to, the policeman's statement from the crash scene, the jury officer's civics lesson, which is where I'm just getting to right now, to find out as this person who was the trolley conductor apparently was arrested for vehicular manslaughter by letting one or the other happen. It doesn't say which one. It leaves for you to actually think about it and to use philosophy in logically deciding what the trolley problem is and what should be the outcome. So I'm entrenched in this now. I just started reading it yesterday, and thankfully it's not the size of War and Peace. It's something I could probably get done in about 2 or 3 days, but it's a great book. Thomas Cathcart, The Trolley Problem, or Would You Throw the Fat Guy Off the Bridge?
You know, it's interesting. One of my seminary professors has written a response to that.
Oh, really?
And so I always have kind of, for the last couple of years, I've been like, I need to read that book and then read the response, and I haven't gotten to it. So I'm going to write that down and make that one of my next reads, because that sounds really fascinating.
Yeah. I'm afraid to talk to my son about it because I'm sure his intellect will outweigh mine in leaps and bounds, and I'm afraid that he's going to make me look silly when I respond to what I think it should be. So, but I'm interested to see what your professor said about that. That'd be great to find out.
You know what? I always have loved those moral dilemma scenarios, or those questions that I did a thing with adult leadership, and then I ended up being an adult leader for youth leadership with our local Chamber of Commerce. And I love having those sort of moral dilemmas where you have to pick, sometimes it's who do you let into your lifeboat, or who do you have to kick off the island, or
yes.
And it makes for some great discussion about, well, how do you put value on another person? It's amazing, these kind of exercises.
It is. Yep. Yeah, I remember when I was in college, the big one was the lifeboat of who do you throw off. And,
right.
So yeah, those are really fascinating.
Oh, so that's what I'm reading right now.
Excellent. Well, I've got one, and only because I'm kind of like this already. So I wanted to just download a book on my Kindle app. I do a podcast with some buddies of mine from the UK. We call it the ABCs of Fording Ahead, and it's basically a positivity podcast giving you, quote, the ABCs, or the building blocks of how to cross that river you think you can't cross. It's whatever it is. It's some emotional or mental obstacle, and how do some people learn how to build a bridge or tunnel under, and some people just sit there and let the emotion or the bad things make them feel like they can't cross that river. And so I got this book called Learned Optimism: How to Change Your Mind and Your Life. It's written by Martin Seligman, and it really is about how your mind it can be programmed. And if you let yourself fall into a rut of day in and day out, the same things you're thinking, the same way you think, the same beliefs, even just your emotional patterns, your brain becomes accustomed to that, and that becomes your comfort level. So how do you overcome those comforting things that are really bringing you down? How do you learn to be optimistic? And it basically gives you the tricks of how to break the habit and reprogram your mind so you don't spiral into feeling down or feeling less optimistic. And it's something I just kind of do naturally. So a lot of the stuff I'm reading, I'm going, yeah, I kind of do that. Yeah. But to hear it from a PhD psychology professor's perspective on how to really get yourself to become more optimistic, that the universe, and this is a phrase, well, I think you've heard me say it before, but sort of in a nutshell, you're so insignificant to the universe. The idea that the universe is out to get you, that's a little bit of sophistry. It's not. You're making either bad choices, bad decisions, or you've got a negative kind of disposition. And how do you get yourself to think more positive, even in tough situations? It's just a really good read. How to Change Your Mind and Your Life. Learned Optimism.
Yeah, I remember a professor saying one time in one of our classes that if you think that you're important enough that the universe is out to get you, you're probably a narcissist.
Yes.
That may be part of your problem.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Goodness.
Very well could be true.
So that's it. I've only got the one. Beyond that, like I've said before, in this crazy run up to a presidential election cycle, doing what I do in radio, I feel like I am nonstop reading news articles, blogs, blog posts, social media posts, tweets, Twitter accounts. There are times where my wife is like, could you just look at me just like for 5 minutes, pretend I'm in the same room with you. So I feel bad about that, but you never know when you're going to need that piece of information going by, and it's an addiction. It truly is. I have to force myself to put the phone down.
I feel the same way when I was doing traffic and doing news at different points. If I'm not in the loop as to what is happening, I feel like I am behind the 8 ball so much, if you want to coin all these phrases, that I felt like I was going to need 2 to 3 days just to catch up, to be up to speed with everybody else and reporting what's happening.
And it's an addiction. I mean, because of what we do, I feel myself like, I truly feel like I'm missing something, like there's something absent. And it's the addictive personality thing where you've got to fill it. If there's a gap, I have to fill it with something. Yep. And I have to learn that, no, I can't let that need to think I'm going to miss something overtake what's really important. And that's what's happening right now. Like the immediacy of family or being to dinner or, being out, like we're camping this week, putting the phone down. It's been really good for me to just put it on my charger on next to the bed and go outside and go kayak, go walk. Don't have the phone with me.
That's great. I'll have to keep that in mind as I go through these things as well, because I'm still even sitting around right now figuring out, what did I miss? Is the president okay? Is he back out of the...
Has he gotten back to... yeah.
No, I'm having that itch, and I'm ready to pick up the phone as we speak, so I have to stop. So I'll have to...
Well, we'll try to wrap this up for you so you can get back to your addiction, too.
No.
All right. We've got one last category. Let's go to what are you listening to? Now, this could be a book on tape, or although a lot of people throw that in the listening section, but it could be a podcast. I know I like to give podcast shout outs to folks who have been supportive of our show, but is there something you're listening to right now? Walt, we'll go to you first.
2 podcasts I'll mention real quick. The Marine Corps Movie Minute, which Alan and I get to be on all this week. They come out Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They're breaking down Heartbreak Ridge, the great Clint Eastwood movie. And Alan and I are covering minute 115, 16, and 17 of that movie with those guys. And they're great guys. We're having a lot of fun with that. So check that out.
Keep in mind that those episodes actually dropped 2 weeks ago if you want to go back and listen.
Oh, they dropped 2 weeks ago, so you can listen to all 3 of them right now.
Yes.
So
yeah, it's a weird thing when you're recording ahead of time, but yeah.
Yes, that's right. So if somehow you're listening real time, they dropped today.
If you have tapped into our feed,
if for some stupid reason that's what you invested your time in, congratulations, you get to listen to them this week. But
if you wasted your one wish on a DeLorean ride to this point in time, well, aren't you a sad, sad person?
Can I have a mulligan?
You are not a narcissist. You hate yourself. And so yes, check out those 3 minutes of the Marine Corps Movie Minute. Great guys, fun podcast to listen to. And then I think I'm stealing some thunder from Alan here. I started listening to the ABCD TOS podcast, which is the ABCD of
the original
Star Trek, and they're going alphabetically through all 3 seasons. So it's interesting because the first episode is in season 3, the second episode is in season 1, and the third episode is in season 2. So you're all over the place. But I was listening yesterday, and I was like, oh man, I got to jump over and rewatch this episode because they were hitting these points that I had just not thought of. I probably hadn't watched that episode in a couple of years. So a lot of fun. Tom Taylor, who was our guest a couple weeks back, just a great, great guy. He is one of the hosts of that show. So again, if you just look for the ABCD:TOS, you'll find their podcast, and it is a lot of fun.
All right. Anything else you're listening to?
Yeah, a ton of stuff. Some of it I've already mentioned. Some of it I'll mention in the weeks to come. But those are the 2 big ones that I'm kind of focused on this week.
All right, Steve, let's go over to you. I know news is a big thing, but are you into any podcasts? Is there anything that you're listening to?
Well, believe it or not, I've been trying to listen to some of your podcasts right here with your listeners' lounge, and I've been loving everything I've been hearing. So I think I'm hooked beyond whatever I hear from myself because, well, I'm narcissistic. I have to hear myself talk, so that's all right. But beyond that, no, I've started to listen to some of these events, and I'm going to be probably picking this up on a regular basis. But one thing that I've picked up on that I just noticed in the last few months, and it's on the music side of things, is this app called Spotify. I don't know what it is. It plays music.
Welcome to the 21st century, Steve.
Thank you. Well, I went kicking and screaming into it because being a radio purist, I didn't want to defer away from the radio stations that I listen to all the time, especially even if it's online and down, streaming stations. But I tried Spotify just a few weeks ago for the first time, and I actually created a couple of my own stations that I like and some of my own music. And I'm thinking, I can hear this without commercial? Oh, my goodness. So I tried Spotify for the first time a few weeks ago, and I've been doing that. One of the bands that I actually listen to more frequently as I hear them is one that my youngest son, Jason, introduced me to this past year, and it's a band from Nashville, Tennessee called Goodbye June. Don't know if you've heard of them.
No.
That's a new one.
They're like a rock country Creole type of band from Nashville. Landon Milbourne, Brandon Qualkenbush, and Tyler Baker are the performers. They're all cousins from the Nashville area. And it's kind of like a little bit of the Black Crowes meets Stevie Ray Vaughan meets anything that we listened to rock and roll wise in the 1980s. It's really interesting. And my favorite song by them is called Bamboozled. And my youngest son's now rolling his eyes thinking, Dad, now you're not cool. Stop. Just stop. Sorry, Jason, have to do it. But he actually introduced me to this band, Goodbye June, and I've started to listen to them. And he actually, being like us, he actually created his own mix on, ready for this? A compact disc. He burned 20 songs on a CD so we can listen to it in his radio of his 20-year-old car. And I've been listening to that play.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Isn't that cool? But that's
yes.
That's what I've been listening to music-wise. But as far as anything on television, that's what I've been doing, and that's pretty much it right now. Keeps me busy.
The cool thing about Spotify, and I'm still a fan of, what was the one before Spotify? Because I've got both accounts. Pandora.
I have that.
Is when you start hearing new stuff come into your channel, and then, hey, do you like it or not? And then you get introduced to stuff that, back in our day, we'd have to go to like the Turtles or the records and tape store and just sit in the store and listen and say, oh, what's this playing? I've never heard that before. What's that album? And then go buy the album, right?
Yes.
Now that's an area of technology that I think is just ridiculously cool. My kids know more music at their age than I ever did at theirs because they have it at the tips of their fingers.
Yep. And they can pick and choose a song they like, and they do not have to buy the full album if they wish not to. Or they can go online and go to anything else and find multiple songs by that one artist that they are fond of. And I agree. I think this is one of those things that socially has been a great improvement for all of us of all generations, where music is so accessible now.
And Walt, we should do another shout out to your buddy Ben, your nephew, who was with us several episodes back, who is a growing musician in the Nashville area.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben Kramer of Old Sea Brigade, and you can catch his stuff. It's on Spotify if you want to just check out some of the music before you buy it. Again, that's Old Sea Brigade, and he was great. I loved having him on.
I'm writing this down as we speak.
I write it down. I tell you, I really enjoyed listening to all of his songs and getting ready for that interview. I was like, wow, this guy's really, really good because he does pretty much everything and then hires artists and friends who are musicians to either be in the studio to cut the stuff or then go on the road with him. It was fascinating to hear the life of a rising musician who's making a career at being a musician. It's awesome.
Oh, I love that. Love it.
Yeah, I do too. It's inspiring. When you get somebody who's got that creative passion and they're skilled, I just get jealous. My brother's like that. He's a bassist. He's got a day job in IT, but he is just a phenomenal musician and is part of 3 or 4 different cover bands. And will pretty much every Friday or Saturday night playing somewhere now that bars have been opening. Even if it's to half houses, he's still, getting paid to play music. And I think that's really cool.
I think so too. And that's the one thing I miss with this pandemic right now is both of my sons, consecutive years were musicians in their high school music programs and marching bands. And this year has been so quiet on the stands where it's limited access, limited bands, no performances on the field, and just playing the sideline tunes for their local high school. I sympathize with those musicians who have the creativity that love to go out and perform, not getting the chance to do it right now. Here's hoping they can do that in the near future.
I agree. It's tough when you've got, because they're every bit part of Friday Night Lights as the kids playing on the gridiron. There's a lot of bands that's what they're going to go to college on. They're going to get that scholarship or that opportunity to play every bit as much from an artistic side as from an athletic. All right. Well, for me, I don't have to do a shout out to the Marine Corps Movie Minute since Walt already did that, but I will give a shout out to a couple of the shows that I know we like to endorse. I know they're ones that I subscribe to and I listen to, and I just love them. Our friends across the pond in the UK have a explicit but very entertaining entertainment-based show. You're not going to get any politics there. It's called 60MW Podcast. They used to be called 60 Minutes With, but they kept getting too many people who just got done watching the CBS news show email them telling what a horrible thing they did. I was like, we're not 60 Minutes. It used to be an idea they were going to interview people for an hour at a time, and then they went to other things and just kept the name. So it's now 60MW. I like to think of it as 60 Megawatts Podcast, but that's from the UK. Golden Rage of TV. We have Pat McCormick, who leads that. That is a YouTube channel show, but it's a minute and a half every day that he'll drop a little bit about the golden age of television. And by the time you're hearing this, he will have had just the week ago been a co-host on the very first ever inaugural voiceover awards and induction into the Hall of Fame for voiceover talent and voiceover actors. So you'll be able to find that on the Voiceover Hall of Fame Award channel on Facebook, and maybe go back and rewatch that. The Real Queens of Queens, 3 ladies that grew up in the Queens, New York area. They're sort of like a Seinfeld. You never know what they're going to talk about, but you get a slice of life of what it was like to be raised, born and bred, and living in Queens, New York. The Bad Cop Show, our buddy BK with the BK on the Air Escape Pod. Geek to Me Radio, always listen to that. And just a couple more. You already mentioned it, Walt, about our friends over at Radio Labyrinth. Tim Andrews, you can hear on WSB if you stream the morning show on the Von Hessler Doctrine, 9 to noon. He's a man of 1,000 voices, but Tim Andrews has a podcast called Radio Labyrinth. It is really, really good. Got to do a shout out to our buddies, the Rocky Minute, Jason and Doug, 2 officers in the New Jersey area that have a mutual love of the Rocky movie franchise. And I always think of these guys now with what's going on with the law enforcement and law and order. And I always keep them kind of in my thoughts and prayers every night because they are just as creative, just as fun. They love having these kinds of movie conversations, but their day job, man, I don't know how they do it day in and day out, going, into harm's way where most people are running away.
Yeah, they're amazing guys. And they're a lot of fun. Their show is fantastic. If you're a Rocky fan or you just like to laugh, great show to check out.
All right, that's going to do it for me. So before we get to some housekeeping, Steve, it has been a pleasure to have you join us. It's been so great to hear your voice on our show and to be willing to step up and be on the stage with just a couple of schmucks trying to have fun at this. So thank you so much.
Well, gentlemen, schmucks, whatever you want to call yourselves, it's been my pleasure to be with you. I thank you for inviting me on. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I hope I get to continue to hear these shows more often with other guests.
Excellent. Walt, let's go tell everybody, if they are maybe tuning in for the first time, they're friends and fans of Steve's work and his career, and they go, oh, he was on a podcast, let's go listen, and they want to learn a little bit more and maybe even reach out to us. Where do they go and how do they do it?
The best place to find us is always going to be on Facebook, or at least until something better comes along, I guess. But facebook.com/The Wilder Ride, and from there, what you're going to want to do is follow us. Immediately upon hitting that button, you open a door into a magical world called the Listeners Group. So if you join the Listeners Group, you'll have 3 questions to answer just to make sure you're not a Russian bot. Excuse me. And you can just, like I said, answer those quick questions. You'll be a part of the Listeners Group. No politics, no craziness, no news, just news about entertainment, news about our show, discussions about every kind of entertainment and movie-related topic you can possibly imagine. So it's just a good break from the craziness and mayhem of life. So again, that's facebook.com/The Wilder Ride. And also you can check out our website, which is thewilderride.com. And it's got our bios of our guests, old episodes, places you can find us around the web, all kinds of fun stuff.
And I would encourage everyone to come back next week. Every Tuesday, a brand new episode drops. and come find out who we've had with us joining us on the Listener's Lounge. Who knows? Maybe it'll be you. You didn't even know. You came back from the future and came back and heard yourself on our show. So come on back for another edition of the Wilder Ride Listener's Lounge. Oh man, Steve, that was better than a massive tie up on 285 and 400.
Oh, thank goodness too, because now that they've opened up that ramp, we don't have to see any more of those problems. Thank goodness. Because I used to have to do traffic reports and have my voice go out and sound like Marvin the Martian or something, because that would make me very angry.
Why didn't you do that sooner? Oh my God, we're voiceover talent right here.
Another life ahead of me, maybe.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for being here.
Hit the dance floor, you gotta be jumping, jive, like a wild train, roll right off your track. Like a wild train, roll right off your track.